The clang of iron on iron echoed through the cavernous smithy, the rhythmic thuds reverberating in the thick, smoky air. Outside, the town of Dorleigh bustled with its usual morning trade. Vendors hawked their goods, children darted between wagons, and the smell of baked bread mingled with that of horses and rain-damp earth. But inside the forge, the world revolved around fire, steel, and the steady hands of Jonas Cael. He was a legend in Dorleigh, not for kindness, but for power. Once a nobleman who'd abandoned his title to build a thriving weapons empire, Jonas now ran Cael Ironworks with ruthless precision. His clients ranged from royal guards to mercenary bands. His word was law, his contracts watertight. And his reputation? Icy, unyielding. But even steel cracks under pressure. It was just after dawn when the first symptoms hit. A sharp pain in his chest mid-swing. He paused, wiped his brow, and blamed it on the forge heat. When the second wave hit, this time like a fist crushing his ribs, he staggered back. The third came moments later, and he collapsed like an oak felled by a single blow. His apprentice, Thomas, screamed for help as Jonas fell face first onto the coal-dusted stone. The village infirmary wasn't built for emergencies, let alone a collapsing man who weighed more than a wagon wheel. But they rolled him in on a cart pulled by a spooked horse, yelling for the healer. "Move the cots, now!" barked a voice sharp enough to cut through panic. Clara Edevane had been tending to a fevered child when the alarm came. She stepped into the main chamber of the infirmary, her skirts pulled up and gloves already snapped on. The man on the cart was unconscious, his lips blue, sweat clinging to every inch of his skin like dew on a dying leaf. She moved on instinct. Lay him flat. No time for subtlety, Adel, prep the bloodroot extract. Duran, get the heart clamps and the electrowant. We're going to need it. The apprentice healer obeyed without hesitation. The room swelled with the scent of crushed herbs, burned linen, and adrenaline. Clara leaned over him, mask lowered. Her fingers moved with confidence, checking pulse, breath, and muscle reaction. "He's crashing," she muttered. "Heart's giving out. Get the wand ready." Then she saw his face. She froze. Not because she recognized a patient from a past visit. No. Because this was him. Jonas Cael. The man who had once summoned her into a smoky meeting chamber 5 years ago, only to throw her out of the guild. The man who had coldly signed her expulsion from the Iron Rights Healer program, the apprenticeship that had been her life, her legacy, and her father's last wish. He hadn't asked why her numbers didn't add up. Hadn't listened when she'd pleaded for time to explain. One mistake, not even hers, and he'd destroyed her. With a signature. With silence. And now, here he lay, chest rising weakly, lips gasping, body failing. She felt her hands tremble. The world spun for a moment. Then Clara inhaled deeply. Not for him. For herself. "Charge the wand," she commanded, snapping back into motion. "We're not losing him." The heart wand, an old relic of arcane science, sparked with energy as Adel brought it close. Clara pressed her hands firmly to his chest, counted down, and yelled, "Now!" His body jerked violently, then slumped. Flatline. Again. "Charge again, hurry." The second jolt made the lights flicker in the room. Smoke rose faintly from his shirt. A faint beep. Then another. A slow, rhythmic tone. "He's stabilizing," Duran whispered in awe. Clara didn't respond. Her gaze stayed fixed on his face, memorizing every crease and scar, every shadow of arrogance that now looked like weakness. She had saved him. Again. This time, not from a mistake he didn't notice, but from death itself. As the assistants moved to clean up, Clara stood rooted at the end of the bed. Her breath was ragged, but her eyes were dry. She watched them wheel him into the recovery room, still unconscious. Once, he'd tossed her away like scrap metal. Today, she had forged his second chance. She didn't know what would happen when he woke. But for now, she turned away, her fingers still tingling from the wand's charge, her heart steady in a way it hadn't been in years. There was power in healing. And she was the one holding it now. =========================================================================================================================ng Not because the room was unfamiliar, it wasn't. He had helped fund the expansion of Dorleigh's infirmary years ago, even if he'd never set foot in it until now. No, the strangeness came from the silence. No hammer ringing. No shouting apprentices. No flicker of flame or scent of molten ore. Only the antiseptic tang of medicinal herbs, the occasional creak of a wooden beam, and a soft, rhythmic beep from the heart monitor at his bedside. His eyes fluttered open slowly, adjusting to the pale dawn light filtering through the slatted windows. He was alive. But it didn't feel like victory. He tried to sit up, too fast. A sharp pain lanced through his chest, and he groaned, sagging back into the pillows. "Easy," came a voice. Familiar. Female. Firm. He turned his head and saw her standing by the window, the sunlight catching the edges of her auburn hair, now tied back in a practical braid. She wore healer's robes, not the loose, linen kind worn by novices, but the tailored garb of a certified head nurse. Her eyes met his with a gaze sharp enough to slice metal. "Welcome back, Lord Cael," she said, her tone dry. "I haven't been called that in years," Jonas murmured, throat dry. "Just Jonas now." "Fitting," she replied, tapping her quill against a wooden clipboard. "Titles suit people with functioning hearts." He frowned. "Do I know you?" "You did," she said. "Once. Briefly. Not that you ever looked up from your ledger long enough to notice." Jonas blanked, confusion knitting his brows. Her face tugged at something deep in memory, but it wouldn't come. He'd seen thousands of faces, apprentices, guild members, clients, rivals. Most blurred into a single fog of names and obligations. She didn't move. Didn't smile. Then it clicked. He saw her not as she was now, but younger, thinner, eyes wider, hope still in them. An intern. No, an apprentice healer. Clara. Something. Edwin? No, Edevane. Clara Edevane. His breath caught. You were with the Iron Rights Guild," he said slowly, struggling to sit up again. "You were dismissed after a single numerical discrepancy on a potion quota sheet," she finished, her voice cool. "Which wasn't mine. Which I flagged. Which you ignored." Jonas stared at her, speechless. She crossed the room slowly, her shoes barely making a sound on the worn stone floor. "I remember that day better than I remember my own graduation. It was raining. My boots squeaked in the corridor. I had just received word that my final evaluation had been delayed again because someone had misfiled an ingredients ledger. You summoned me, handed me a parchment, and said, what were the words? Oh yes. This isn't personal. It's policy." Jonas swallowed hard. I trusted the guildmaster's report." "You didn't read it," Clara said. "You didn't investigate. You didn't even ask me what happened. You handed me a dismissal letter and moved on with your day. And I lost everything." Her voice broke slightly, not with weakness, but with fury that had calcified into something stronger over the years. "I spent 2 years rebuilding," she said. "I joined a traveling infirmary wagon just to stay in the craft. Slept in barns, treated plague victims, delivered babies in the middle of war zones. I worked twice as hard to earn half the recognition, all because one man couldn't be bothered to read past a signature." Jonas had no reply. He stared at the blanket over his legs, hands balled into fists atop the white sheet. "You didn't just fire me," Clara continued, softer now but no less cutting. "You branded me. Your signature was worth more than my truth. And it almost broke me." He looked up at her, guilt pouring through him like hot coals. "I didn't know. I swear." "You didn't care," she corrected. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. "I don't know what to say," he admitted finally. "You don't need to say anything," she replied. "You're here because I saved your life. That's my job. But don't mistake that for forgiveness." He nodded once, slowly, as if each movement required effort beyond the physical. "Then why did you? Why did I what?" "Save me." Clara's eyes narrowed, but there was no malice in them. Only truth. "Because healers heal," she said. "Not just the people we like. Not just the ones who deserve it. Because if I had let you die, I'd be no better than the man who threw me out to protect his pride." Jonas closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them again, they were wet with something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years, shame. "I remember the letter now," he said. "The apprentice who flagged the error, Calverin, the supply master, had said you were at fault. I never double-checked. I was too busy securing a shipment deal with the Crown Guard. And I was too expendable to be worth checking on," she said simply. He looked at her again, but this time he really saw her, not as a remnant of a mistake, but as a woman who had clawed her way back from the ashes he'd helped scatter. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She studied him, long and slow. "Good," she said. "But don't say it for my sake. Say it for yours." She turned, ready to leave the room. But before she reached the door, Jonas spoke again, this time with the voice of a man who had wielded power all his life and finally realized it didn't matter when you had no soul behind it. "Clara," he said. She stopped but didn't turn. "Did it cost you much?" She let the question hang in the air before replying. It cost me everything. But it gave me this," she said, gesturing around the modest infirmary. "A place where no one gets thrown away for being inconvenient." She paused, then glanced over her shoulder. "Rest, Jonas. Your heart might be beating again, but that doesn't mean it's whole." Then she was gone, leaving Jonas in a bed that suddenly felt colder than the grave he'd nearly entered. Jonas didn't sleep that night. Not from pain, though his chest still throbbed, or the creaking of the infirmary's beams overhead. It was the silence that kept him awake, threaded with Clara's words. They weren't angry screams or dramatic accusations. No, what haunted him was her restraint. The stillness in her voice. The truth that had hardened into quiet strength. He had built his entire life around steel. Around things he could shape, temper, command. Contracts. Forges. Men. But Clara Edevane? She wasn't steel. She was fire, the kind that warms and warns all at once. And now she burned inside his memory. In the days that followed, Jonas began to move, albeit slowly. The physicians had insisted on 2 weeks of recovery. His apprentices, terrified and temporarily leaderless, had been instructed by a courier to continue operations without him. Not that they needed much guidance. Jonas had drilled discipline into them like swordplay into a squire. His absence was a ripple, not a quake. But what surprised him was how much he didn't miss the clamor. For the first time in decades, Jonas noticed the way sunlight painted the floorboards in golden slants. He watched how the infirmary cat curled in the same corner each morning, chasing a beam of light as if it held a secret. He listened to the wind through the shutters. And he listened, most of all, for Clara's footsteps. She was always moving. Tending to patients. Organizing herbs. Conversing quietly with her staff. She never lingered, never idled near his room longer than duty required. But she was present, in the way only someone who truly gave a damn could be. Jonas began taking mental notes. She started each shift with tea, black, with a slice of dried lemon. She tied her braid twice in a day, always when she was frustrated. She hummed under her breath when stitching wounds but fell utterly silent when reading charts. The small things became an obsession. And then, guilt's cousin, curiosity, took hold. One morning, Clara walked in holding a vial of tincture. "Time for your chest rub," she said flatly. "I don't suppose you sing to all your patients," he joked. She didn't look up from her tray. "Only the ones too weak to argue." He smiled faintly. "I'm not as weak as I look." "That's unfortunate," she muttered, dabbing her fingers with the salve. "Clara." She paused, hand halfway to his chest. He never said her name like that before, not in the boardroom, not during her firing. Not as a person. He said it now like he had rehearsed it all night. "I've been trying to remember the exact day I signed your dismissal," he said quietly. "But it's a blur. That's what bothers me. Not that I made a mistake, but that I forgot it was you." Clara didn't move. "You didn't forget. You never noticed." He exhaled slowly. "I want to change that." She applied the tincture, firm but not unkind. "Change takes time. I'm willing to give it," he said. She looked up at him for a moment. Her eyes weren't cold, but guarded. "You can't fix the past with words, Jonas. Not even with actions. People think apologies are a magic wand. But they're not. They're just the beginning of real work." "Then let me work," he said. "Tell me how." Clara capped the vial and stood straight. "You start by getting out of bed when I say so, not before. You eat your meals. You stop asking me about the past unless I bring it up. And you don't confuse recovery with redemption." A pause. "And if I want to do something good?" he asked. "Then do it for someone other than yourself," she replied. She walked out again. But this time, Jonas didn't feel empty. He felt sparked. The next week, Jonas requested a visitor, Rhett Dallow, a retired merchant who now ran the town's small community garden for recovering veterans. Jonas asked for a favor. Then another. Then he sent 2 letters, one to the Iron Rights Guild, and the other to Dorleigh's grant board. Behind Clara's back, without ceremony or flair, Jonas Cael began reshaping metal in a different form: people, partnerships, possibilities. He started by anonymously sponsoring new medical equipment for the infirmary. Then he used his contacts to acquire extra land behind the building for expansion. He even organized a team of blacksmith apprentices to begin crafting wheelchairs, walking sticks, and braces for recovering patients, free of charge. He said nothing to Clara. Not yet. But she noticed. She noticed the parcels arriving. The whispered rumors from city officials. The way patients who'd waited months suddenly got what they needed. One evening, after her shift, Clara found Jonas sitting outside in the infirmary's herb garden, wrapped in a wool cloak. He was sketching something in a notebook. "Planning to design another siege engine?" she asked, arms crossed. He glanced up and offered her the page. "A mobile clinic cart. Something you can wheel into the hills during frost season. Durable, enclosed, heat efficient. Your assistant said the highlands have poor access in winter." Clara didn't take the notebook. She just stared at him. "Why are you really doing all this?" she asked. "I don't know who I am without the forge," he said. "But for the first time, I think I want to find out." She slowly lowered herself onto the bench beside him. They sat in silence for a long while, the air crisp, scented with thyme and old soil. "I've been angry at you for so long," Clara said at last. "I don't know what to do when that anger has nowhere left to burn." "You don't have to forgive me," he said. "I know," she whispered. "But I might want to understand you." Jonas looked at her then, really looked. The lines by her eyes, the faint scar near her temple, the way her hands still bore the faint ink of herbs and charcoal. And he thought not of the apprentice he'd once overlooked, but of the woman he now saw. Fully. Fiercely. The fire hadn't dimmed. It had simply changed color. And in that moment, Jonas Cael, once the coldest man in Dorleigh, found warmth, not from steel, not from profit, but from the quiet revolution of a healer who never stopped choosing compassion. Even when she had every reason not to. =================================================================================================================================================================================================================================================sky in half. Thunder shook the rooftops of Dorleigh, and lightning danced across the hills like angry spirits. The town's cobbled streets quickly turned to rivers, flooding the gutters and cloaking everything in an eerie, silver fog. Inside the infirmary, candles flickered in their sconces as the power crystal that lit the building gave out with a soft whine. The backup lanterns, rarely used, flared to life, casting an amber glow that made the world look softer, older, more fragile. Clara moved quickly from room to room, checking the patients, securing the medicine cabinets, handing out extra blankets. Her braid had come loose hours ago, and damp curls clung to her forehead. Her boots were soaked. Her hands were scraped from catching a falling lamp. But still she worked, because storms never asked if you were ready. They just came. She reached the east corridor, the wing closest to the storm's fury, and realized with a muttered curse that the back window had blown open. Rain pelted the stone floor, and a shallow pool had already begun to spread beneath it. Clara darted toward the storage cabinet for a ceiling tarp. As she turned the corner near the utility closet, her foot met something slick. A stray herbal jar, glass shattered from a nearby shelf. Her heel slipped. Time seemed to lurch forward and back all at once. The floor rushed up to meet her. And didn't. Strong arms caught her. She gasped, bracing instinctively, heart racing. Jonas. He held her tight, one arm wrapped behind her back, the other braced against the wall to steady them both. He wasn't supposed to be out of bed. He was pale, breathing heavily from the exertion, still in his infirmary shift tunic, the fourth band loosely dangling from his arm. But he was there. "I heard something fall," he said between breaths. "Didn't think. Just moved." "You idiot," Clara whispered, clutching at his tunic to steady herself. "You shouldn't be walking unassisted." "I shouldn't be alive, either," he said, voice rough with emotion. "But here I am." The words weren't dramatic. They were quiet. True. Like they'd taken root somewhere deep. Clara slowly stepped back, aware of the heat between them, the way her fingers still curled against the fabric of his shirt. She looked up into his face, worn, lined, softened by humility, and saw none of the old arrogance. Just him. Human, raw, and terrified of something more than pain. "You saved me," he said. "And I don't mean the night I collapsed. I mean everything after." Clara shook her head, stepping further back, her heart doing somersaults in her chest. "This isn't what healing is," she said carefully. "It's not catching someone during a storm. It's not repayment. Or guilt." "I know," he said. She looked at him then, searching for cracks in his resolve. For signs of performance. But there was none. Only the quiet tension of a man who had once held power and finally realized the cost of wielding it without care. "I wanted to hate you," she said, her voice quieter than the rain outside. "I did. For a long time. I thought if I ever saw you again, I'd turn away. Or worse." "Then why didn't you?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted, tears pricking the corners of her eyes. "Maybe because when I saw you unconscious, All I could think about was how many people depend on you. How many more would suffer if you didn't get another chance. Jonas swallowed hard. That's what makes you stronger than I've ever been. They stood in the dim corridor, the storm roaring like a memory beyond the window, and for a moment neither spoke. Then he reached into his tunic pocket and pulled out a folded piece of parchment. Damp around the edges. Ink slightly smeared. He handed it to her. She opened it. Her name. Clara Edevane. Above it, the sigil of the guild board. Below it, an official reinstatement as a Healer Guild affiliate. Not a trainee. Not an intern. A full-fledged partner. I didn't want to wait for them to come around, Jonas said. I made them see what they missed. What I missed. Clara blinked down at the letter. Her hands trembled. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Don't say anything, he replied. Just know. It was never charity. It's not even an apology. It's truth, finally put to paper. She looked up at him again. He looked exhausted. Rain still battered the windows. And she realized how different this moment was from the one 5 years ago when he'd handed her a dismissal notice without ever meeting her eyes. Now, he looked at her like she was everything he'd forgotten how to believe in. Come on, she said, voice thick. Let's get you back before you collapse again. He nodded. Only if you let me walk beside you. They moved together, slowly, through the hallway. Their shoulders brushed. Their silence said more than words could. The next morning, the storm had passed. But the air between them had changed. Jonas sat by the infirmary hearth, wrapped in a thick wool shawl. Clara brought him tea, black, with lemon. You remembered, he said, smiling faintly. I did, she replied. She hesitated, then sat beside him, not across, not at a distance. I found out who really filed the incorrect quota back then, Jonas said. It was a journeyman named Veska. He admitted it in a memo, but it got buried. Clara nodded slowly. I always suspected. But no one believed me. I do now, he said. And I want to believe more. If you'll let me. Her fingers curled around the tea mug. She stared into the fire. What are you asking for? Time, Jonas said simply. Not forgiveness. Not a second chance. Just time. To stand beside you. To build something better. With you, if that's allowed. Clara didn't answer right away. Then she looked at him. And smiled. Just a little. Like someone beginning to trust spring after too long a winter. Equals. The sun hung low over the village of Dorleigh, casting a golden haze across the rooftops. Children ran laughing through the main square, their joy echoing off cobblestones still damp from the storm that had passed just days before. Merchants unpacked their wares. Musicians played soft tunes on corners. Life had returned to normal, or what passed for it in a town that had just weathered more than wind and rain. But within the quiet hum of a life resumed, something else stirred. A change not loud or sudden, but steady. Like a blacksmith's fire, reignited and nurtured into heat. Jonas Cael stood at the edge of the village green, a letter clenched in his hand. He had received it that morning. The guild council in the capital had made an offer, return to the city, retake his former position as High Coordinator of Metalworks. Full privileges. Full power. His old seat on the board. A post others had fought for now quietly handed back to him like a crown polished and waiting. For a man like Jonas, it should have been a triumphant return. But as he read the letter, he felt nothing. No thrill. No hunger. Just wait. He folded it carefully and tucked it into his coat. Not discarded. Not answered. Not yet. That evening, he climbed the winding path behind the infirmary, stone steps carved long ago by villagers seeking solitude at the lookout point above Dorleigh. It was a quiet hilltop overlooking the valley and the distant silver-blue river that wound toward the capital. Clara was already there. She stood near the edge, the wind tugging at the hem of her robes, her braids swaying behind her like a banner of calm in the soft dusk. In her hands, she held a small journal, the leather cover worn and cracked from years of use. She turned a page, paused, and turned another. Jonas approached slowly. She heard his footsteps and didn't turn, but her voice met him halfway. You got the letter? He nodded. Yes. They want you back, she said. They always do. Power doesn't like to let go of itself. She finally turned to look at him, her eyes lit by the last rays of the sun. And do you want to go back? Jonas didn't answer right away. He walked to the edge of the overlook and stared out at the valley. He could just make out the village school, the forge, and the faint glow of the infirmary windows below. People were walking between homes. A child waved up at them, not knowing who they were. just waving because it was what children did when they saw someone above. "I used to think I had to build an empire to matter," Jonas said. "That every hammer strike had to echo across kingdoms. That legacy meant skyscrapers and steel contracts." "And now?" Clara asked. He looked at her. "And now, I think legacy is who stays when you fall. Who stands beside you when there's no glory left." Clara held his gaze, quiet. "I've spent the past month watching you rebuild," Jonas continued. "Not just me, but this whole place. You care about this village in a way I never knew how to care about anything." "It's not about caring more," she said. "It's about choosing to care even when it hurts." He stepped closer, hesitant at first, then sure. "Then I wanted to choose that." She blinked, surprised. "You're turning them down?" He nodded. "For the first time in my life, I'm saying no to power so I can say yes to purpose." Clara's breath caught. "Why?" Jonas reached into his coat and pulled out a small object, a pendant made of tempered steel. Shaped like a flame. "I forged this myself," he said. "Not in a grand hall. Not for a client. Just because. For someone who carries fire in her bones." He placed it in her hand. "It's not a gift of apology," he said. "It's a symbol. Of what we could build. Together. If you'll let me stay." She stared at the flame in her hand. The weight of it. The shape. The intention. Jonas waited, nervous in a way no battle or negotiation had ever made him. Then Clara closed her hand around the pendant. And smiled. In the weeks that followed, the forge in Dorleigh lit once more, but it wasn't the same. The great furnace no longer belched smoke day and night in a rush to supply soldiers or nobles. Instead, Jonas and a small team crafted tools for local farms. Crutches for the injured. Hinges for old doors that needed repair. And sometimes, in the back corner of the workshop, they built strange, beautiful things, steel sculptures, intricate gears for herbal grinders, even a mobile clinic cart with heat-insulated wheels and a reinforced roof for travel in the snowy pass. Clara visited often. Sometimes to consult. Sometimes to challenge. And once, just to bring him tea. They didn't rush. They didn't declare. But the whole village knew that what was growing between them was not a romance born of spectacle, but of steadiness. Of watching someone change and still choosing to believe in them. Of holding each other accountable, and still offering kindness. A season passed. The first frost came early, and Clara's community clinic prepared for mobile rounds. Jonas insisted on joining. Not to lead, but to learn. They packed supplies, blankets, herbs, and small forge tools in the cart. One morning, before they set out, Clara found Jonas outside the infirmary, fussing with the latch on the cart door. "You've tightened it 4 times, she teased. "I want it to hold," he said. "It will," she smiled. "We built it right." He turned to her. "So what now?" he asked. Clara reached for his hand. "Now we go," she said. "To the places no one else goes. And help the people no one else sees." Jonas looked at their hands. Calloused fingers, weathered palms. The hands of healers. Of smiths. Of people who chose to mend instead of destroy. "I can't promise I won't fail," he said. "Good," she replied. "Because I don't need perfection. I just need you to stay." And so he did. Not because he was saving anyone. But because, this time, he'd been saved.